be part of a larger whole to feel a sense of belonging? Is it healthy to derive your purpose from a mob or other group? For my part, I am who I am, and no group defines that. Hello and welcome to the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt. Today is Saturday the 13th of February of 2021, and I'm glad to have everybody here who's coming on Rumble, on the podcast, or on YouTube. Thank you for paying attention to what I'm saying. I know sometimes that may be a little bit of a hard thing to do for you, particularly when the subject is not one that you're all that interested in. The subject today, just to sort of segueing to that, is mobs, another abdication. Here's the thing. If you're a member of a group, there's not inherently or necessarily something wrong with that. In fact, you can argue that everybody is a member of some sort of group or other. Even if it's just their family, right? You can certainly make that argument. And you can make the argument that belonging to certain groups, regardless of what happens within that group, is okay as well, right? You can make the argument that, your parents you may have a parent who has mental illness issues of one sort or another, and that doesn't define you as a human being necessarily being a part of that group. There are any number of things that you can say in that sort of vein. But what's important to realize is that is the reality. That is to say that bodies of various kinds are naturally diverse in nature. They're not one solid lump, one solid mass of humanity with a hive mind all thinking exactly the same thing, all the time. That's not how that works. And you should realize that there are differences that should be expected in any group. I don't care how small it is. Literally two people, if there's a group of two people, that doesn't mean that they believe or think the same things. That's not what that means, right? So it's important to realize that. And another important realization is that, quite frankly, groups change. And you can't deny that. You can't say that that's not the case. Why? Well, it's because people change. And as people change, the character of a given group is going to change along with them. Right? At least that part of the group is going to change their mind on a particular thing. I've watched individuals go from being very liberal to very conservative and very conservative to being very liberal. I've watched both sides of that happen. I see more people typically go towards conservatism as they get older, but that doesn't mean everybody follows that same path or ends up in that same place. I like to point out and sort of ribbon him a little bit that Tim Pool is prone to every day sort of lean more towards conservatism for a variety of reasons. And one of them is because, quite frankly, he's a thinking man. And I think that that's one of the things that makes people sort of trend towards a conservative perspective on life. But all of that having been said, the point of all of this is, as I say, that any group will change over the course of time. That's something you should expect. It's something you should count to be normal. And again, even if a group doesn't change, you need to be aware that there is a diversity within any given group that makes it so that no two members of that group think and act in the same way. And I could go into details on this with various groups that I've seen. One of them that came to mind while I was thinking about this topic that I was going to cover today was the Tea Party, where I saw a couple of things happen. And by the way, this points to another thing that's can be somewhat problematic. I won't say typically because it's not really typically so, but it can be somewhat problematic. And it is that I believe that there were people who sort of infiltrated what amounts to the Tea Party who did not have the norms or ideas of the Tea Party as a whole, okay? Initially, what they initially sort of stated as their platform. I will also say that there are groups like BLM who have a lot of people who support the group without really understanding what it is that they're supporting. And if they understand what it is that they're supporting, they'll stop supporting the group. That doesn't mean that they'll stop saying, well, Black Lives Matter. Of course they believe that. Why wouldn't they believe that? It's true, right? I say all lives matter, but when I say that, a piece of all lives matter is, without doubt or question, that people who count themselves black, their lives matter just as much as anybody else's. And that's not going to change. And so the point is, when you have a group like Black Lives Matter, that is, from everything that I can tell, a Marxist-based group in which two of the founders of the group are Marxist individuals, you realize that the fact that the group says something doesn't mean that a lot of the people who support that group believes what the group does. And when you look at a group again, like the Tea Party, you see the same sort of thing, right? Initially, I think there were a lot of people who agreed with what the Tea Party said, and the Tea Party said a bunch of stuff that I think was really reasonable, rational, fair, and proper. On the other hand, I saw things that happened later down the line, and most particularly with politicians who claim to represent the Tea Party, where those individuals did not espouse the things that I think, in terms of ideas and ideals, the things that I think a lot of people who thought the Tea Party was a grand idea support or believe. And they showed that on a daily basis. They got enmeshed in the very same swamp that they were trying to defeat, quite frankly. Or not defeat, but change direction of at the very least, right? They got caught up in the power and so forth, and they didn't want to lose it or whatever, and they stopped acting like they should have acted. And so this is one of the problems with groups, right? Is groups change, people within groups change, who's in a given group changes, which means that there's always room for change in that regard because people believe different things. There will always be differences in given groups. There will always be a sort of a natural diversity that flows from the existence of a group. And what that means is if you derive your base person from any group, you probably are going to have problems because when that group changes to be things that you don't like or want it to be, you're either going to change with the group or you're going to change as or against the group. And I hope that if they change in ways that you don't support, unless you decide that you were wrong in what you did support, that your choice will be to change away from the group. Now, let's be clear on something. The fact that you don't support a group doesn't mean don't support every aspect of what happens in a group. I'll put it that way. Doesn't mean that you can't support the group as a general thing, assuming that you have certain things in common with that group that are acceptable. I have a family member who's fond of pointing out that, in their opinion, that, quote, groups don't exist, and I'll disagree with that. No, groups exist. The difference, though, or the consideration needs to be that not every member of any group agrees with all other members of that group. This is what's important to realize. The fact that you are a part of a group doesn't mean that everything that group believes in or supports is good, or something that you believe in or support. It doesn't mean that. And it doesn't take a genius to figure any of this out if you really think about it at all. And here's an interesting thing. If you happen to be a member, a part of multiple groups, those groups might work at cross purposes in certain regards, and you have to decide whether you're going to support either of them or neither of them, right? One way or the other, you have to decide how you're going to do that. The point here, the thing that I'm trying to get across to you is really very simple. Are you a Republican? Are you really? I don't know that I would necessarily make the argument that I'm a Republican. Dan Bongino is fond of saying that he's not a Republican. He's a conservative, and to some degree, he might be libertarian leaning, right? He would have to answer that for sure, but that's the impression that I get listening to what he has to say. But that's not to say he doesn't support the Republican Party, which is a group, right? That's not to say that he doesn't support that in the same way that that individual that I talked about earlier who says there's no such thing as groups happens also to support largely the Democrat perspective on life, okay? The idea that you support generally what a group does is not the same as saying that you believe and agree with every single thing in that group. And again, who you are should be who you are, the group notwithstanding, or a group notwithstanding. Any group that you happen to be a member of or largely agree with notwithstanding. You should be who you are. That's who you should be. And if you happen to decide that it's a good idea to back or be a part of a given group, so be it. But if there comes a time when there's a parting of the ways, don't be horribly surprised. Okay, I'm getting to the point where I need to call this good, so I'm going to do exactly that. Again, today is Saturday, the 13th of February, 2021. I am your host for the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thank you for sitting here and listening through the entire video. Thanks again for everybody who's joining me on Rumble, on the podcast, and on YouTube. And hopefully we'll see you when I do my next Daily Summation, which should be tomorrow. That'll be Sunday, the 14th of February of 2021. I'm not going to say anything more about that. I know people celebrate Valentine's Day. I'm not really much of a celebrant of that. In any case, I hope you're having a good day, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Saturday, the 13th of February, 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.